Recording. Okay, let's see, 10:01 a.m., September 2nd. I'll call the MWPA Executive Committee meeting to order. Allison, will you please call the roll?
Novato Fire District.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
City of Mill Valley. Town of Ross.
Here.
City of San Rafael.
Here.
Quorum is present with 4 members.
Excellent. So any requests to adjust the order of the agenda? I'm seeing none. This is a time for public expression. So the public's welcome to address the executive committee at this time on matters not on the agenda and that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to government code, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take any action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments will be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. And please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your mic when not reporting out. Allison, do we have any members of the public present?
We do, and I'm looking for any raised hands among our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Let's move on to Mark, item 5, the executive officer's report. Mark, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'll just start off at the top with what I'm sure everybody is talking about and then was watching yesterday, and that's the Lassen fire in Marinewood yesterday. Started right behind 22 Lassen Drive in Marinewood, and fortunately it started behind homes and moved away from homes. Burned a total of 44 acres, burned up to the Queenstone Fire Road. If you're familiar with that area and that fire road, it's the Queenstone Fire Road is one of those roads that's pounded into the head of just about every firefighter in Marin because it is a vital access for us and used quite a bit in wildfire. And this fire really is indicative of how fires typically burn in that area, and that is they run up to the ridge, do what we call slop over the ridge just a little bit, and that's exactly what this fire did. It hit the fire road, slowed down, slopped over a little bit, but it was easily contained by aircraft on the lee side of the ridge and firefighters. But I'll offer that the reason why it was easily contained when it slopped over the lee side of the ridge was the higher humidities that we had yesterday with the marine inversion. Had this been on what we call a turnaround day, where we have had 4 or 5 days of low humidities, therefore low fuel moistures, and then we get that first day of an onshore push, I think that the slop over of the Queenstone Fire Road would have been a little bit more significant than it was. I'm being the ex-deputy chief and sitting in what I call now the chief seats and watching the unified command be in effect. I was impressed with the unified command. Between not just the fire unified command, but the law enforcement piece was seamless with the fire piece, and they were working in the command post side by side. I'm very pleased and impressed with how they managed the evacuations, and it was prompt, it was effective, and it was with absolute erring on the side of caution. And those evacuations were with an abundance of caution because for the most part, the fire was burning away from homes. But the public expectation is that we will be evacuating people when there's fires near homes. And that's exactly what they did. Are there places for improvement? Absolutely. And it's fires like this that allow us to be much more efficient when the fires are really that tremendous threat to homes. I also think that this, even though homes weren't immediately above this fire, this is a great example of why we have to focus on the 99% of the fires. They were easily, that is, rather than it being a Queenstone Fire Road, it easily could have been a paved road with houses on it. And it would have gotten to those houses faster and we can get fire engines to it. And so that's why we need all of our community to be engaged with defensible space or home hardening so that these homes can defend themselves until a fire engine can get there. And then, we had this fire on San Rafael Hill last month that we talked about, and that there were veg management projects that had occurred prior to the fire. Ironically, yesterday we received the notices of exemptions for projects that will be happening right in that area. It is in Marin County Parks and Open Space property, and Marin County Parks and Open Space prefers to do their own environmental compliance for projects on their lands. Completely understandable. They're doing it in coordination with us, and that's why they shared those notices of exemptions for projects that we will be funding with us. So literally, many of the homes that were evacuated are slated for veg management projects. And I think that had they known the level of confidence that the community has, and the level of security that they feel knowing that there had been a veg management project when the fire is ignited, allows people to react with concern rather than react with fear. And I see Larry Minicus is in our audience right now, and Kingston Cole both brought up, and now Brandon, Kingston, and Larry are more informed than the average members of the public, but they both were in the area of the fire on Santa Fe Hill last month, and they had confidence that that fire was going to be easily contained because they were aware of the work that had been done. And so I think that's a tremendous opportunity for the MWPA, is to help build confidence within the community that through our work, these fires have less of a chance to be devastating. Statewide, it's not a pretty picture. All the predictions that this could be a devastating fire season are coming true. Currently, we have 5 incidents statewide to have an incident management team. Again, that's that threshold barrier that I kind of makes me look at the drawdown across the state. And as the state becomes more drawn down, it creates more of an opportunity for fires to get beyond initial attack. Of those 5 fires, 1.3 million acres are within those 5 fires. Good news for the Dixie, they've exceeded well over 50% containment. That's usually a threshold that we like to see. And then total wise, statewide, we're at 1.9 million acres burned. And last year we had 4 million acres at the end of the season, with 2 million of those acres being because of a lightning event. So that should paint the picture where we are, that we're almost at 2 million without a lightning event. And we haven't even gotten into the fall with our wind events. Caldor Fire, I'm sure, has a tremendous amount of concern for Marin residents, as that tends to be almost all of California's place of recreation. We probably all have family, friends, or otherwise in the Tahoe Basin. I was communicating, my nephew lives up there. I was communicating frequently with him, preparing him for evacuations, and walked him through his evacuation, and kept tabs on him and said, you tell me your route out of there so I know exactly where you're at. So I'm sure we all have stories like that. The good news is it really is staying out of the homes right now in the Tahoe Basin, and I'm looking at the plans the incident management team have in place, and the communities are well staffed. So right now the confidence level is high, but all it takes is one ember to land in the wrong place. The receptiveness of the fuels is just off the charts. Virtually every ember that's landing is igniting, and normally for a fire to get up in what we run, it needs a couple things to be in alignment: slope or wind or the fuel. Usually you need 2 of those 3 things in place for it to get up and run hard. We're only needing 1 of those things to be in place, and these new embers and new spot fires are getting up and running hard. So that's the scary part. The Zonehaven rollout, both of the videos that we've been working on are completed. The public safety oriented training video has been distributed last week. We've put the final touches on the public information video, and we are working with the sheriff's office and the county for a unified press release. And the sheriff's office will most likely be the author of the unified press release, because it really is the sheriff's office that owns evacuations. And so we feel that should be the primary messaging, but MWPA will be included as a partner on that press release. And so the rollout is being very well coordinated. We're asking each of the member agencies to present to their board the rollout of Zonehaven at the same time that the rollout was going to the public. Our communication strategy, as discussed, is rolling out really well. Ann and I got a preview of the website the day after our last board meeting, and I have to say that they were further along than I thought they would be in development. And I'm very, very happy with what we saw. And they continue to bring ideas back to Ann and I of how they would like our web developers, how they would like to improve it. And one of the things I know that a lot of people wanted out of our current website is a calendar. And so we've set up a calendar that everyone will be able to log into to see the scheduled meetings that we have for committees, any other appropriate events. So just wanted to give you one small snippet of something to look forward to besides our project page, which will be accessed right on the front page. And then they have created so many ways that people could access the projects. They can access the projects via zone. They can access the projects via the goals that we set up as the MWPA. And it's tremendous on the level of access the community will have. Our earned media strategy is going very well. And I'll share this with you guys after the meeting, but I've been sharing a lot of news with you, so I'm trying to keep it pertinent. But KQED, Adam found this conversation that KQED had on the radio that I found fascinating. And it discussed acreage versus containment as a metric of wildfire, and maybe those aren't the best metrics. It discussed smoke and prescribed fire smoke versus wildfire smoke. Talked about the pace that California is on is not sustainable for firefighters. Talked about Shaver Lake and what a great example of what proactive vegetation management can mean for a community under extreme fire conditions. And it also discussed the need to use all of our tools in wildfire prevention and not just look at one tool. And so we emphasized the need to keep all those tools available for us. And so we reached out to them because it was such a fascinating and intriguing conversation that I would like to continue that conversation. And so we reached out to KQED and that reporter and say, hey, we would like to have a conversation to extend that conversation. And she said, yes, let's do it. So we're looking at sometime next week for us to have a phone interview to extend that. And that's where I can start adding concern versus fear, lucky versus unlucky, and getting our residents to take the responsibility that we need them to take. And then I sent you the Western Cities article, and I want to point out that Shashi probably won't like this, but she was really the primary author of that article, and then the rest of us chimed in to help put a little bit of a touch here or there. But Sashi, thank you very much for setting the foundation for that article. I really do think it's an effective tool for us to use in sharing what the MWPA is. And you don't have to rebuild from scratch every time someone asks you that question. We had a fantastic meeting. We're calling it the MWPA team on August 23rd. It was an off-site strategic type planning meeting that included Ann and myself, Jean Bonander, Bill Keene, Megan was there, Charlotte Jourdain, and Elisa Schiffman. And if they didn't flat out call it a SWOT analysis, but that's really Jean and Bill facilitated the meeting, had a guided set of questions that really were SWOTs, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats oriented questions. And Bill just shared the notes with us yesterday, and we'll be sharing the notes with the board as well, and also recommendations from that SWOT analysis. And that will, I think, help inform the strategic ad hoc subcommittee when we get that convened and working. Ann and I will be working with Bruce in the next week or so to create the scope for the strategic and the governance ad hoc subcommittees. But I think much of the work that we had at our offsite meeting last week will help set that strategic ad hoc subcommittee up for success. Charlotte Jourdain convened our first objectives and metrics meeting. We were able to do it in person in a room large enough now with the new COVID and Delta constraints in place. We felt that it was important to have this meeting in person, and a lot of brainstorming. You know how it is for that first meeting. We chased a lot of squirrels and didn't necessarily get everything done that we thought we'd get done in that first meeting, but I think it was important for everyone to get that brainstorming out of the way. And we decided that these meetings are going to have to be half-day meetings rather than 1 to 2 hour meetings in order to get everything done that we want. I'll just keep going on the Charlotte Jourdain train right now, and that is the grant program development update. She did, we asked her to tackle the development of creating a grant management program, and she succeeded expectations in that. And we looked at different ways to completely automate that, to decrease the amount of staff work required to run a grant program, which can be immense. She found out that SurveyMonkey, which has changed its name to Momentive, actually has a grant management application within their software. And the more Charlotte looked into it, the more it was almost exactly what we're looking for at a relatively inexpensive price. And we are working with Fireside, who is developed a DSpace application for us. And all the information from a DSpace app or in evaluation will automatically transfer over to the Momentive site. So if a resident has received one of those evaluations, then every piece of information that was in that evaluation will be already captured within, address information, APN, and most importantly, what work was recommended from the evaluators, because we only want to fund the work that's being recommended from the evaluators. So we don't get into the habit of funding landscaping projects that may or may not have tremendous value for defensible space. We're also creating a way to import the evaluations from the member agencies that aren't using the Fireside app yet. And so what we're really trying to do is make it as easy as possible for the residents to apply for grants. And they don't have to fill out information that's already been filled out in one place and fill it out 3 more times somewhere else. And we're trying to automate all the work for staff, so we aren't doing the same duplicative work for a couple of reasons. Duplicative work is a waste of time, and also that is a portal for mistakes. Every time you enter data twice, you have the chance of entering it incorrectly. So very excited about that. The contract for Momentive was low enough value, and since we already had a budget center for that type of work, I was able to sign the contract, and Momentive is already engaging in developing the grant program management for us. And I point to Bruce right now. Bruce hosted an awesome little walk to look at the forest health, especially within the madrones and the hardwoods in Marin with Nevada Fire. And then that gave us an opportunity. We brought Ray Moritz, and then refresh my memory of your friend's name.
Mike Landrum. He's a retired silviculturist for the United States Forest Service.
And his knowledge and information was amazing. And my suggestion to Bruce is that we hold more of these types of discussions and walks with other fire agencies and explore the idea of videoing it so that we can share that even better throughout our member agencies. And then it turned into a scenario discussion, and we were able to work with almost all of the Nevada battalion chiefs to walk through a catastrophic fire command and control wise. So it was a great day. And then my final piece is the COC is really gearing up big time for their work regarding the end of year report. And they've identified a couple different subcommittees. They're going to divide and conquer that task. It is a big project for them to work on. So they've created a series of subcommittees. They have a scope for each of those subcommittees. Larry Chu is really taking the lead on this. And I think he's mapping out a good process for them that we will have a high quality end of year report from the COC. And with that, I'll take any questions from you.
Fantastic, Mark. So board members, questions, comments? Dennis and Julie?
Yeah, Mark, on the software for the grant program, I've heard so much in my recent past about this is the perfect program, this is the perfect application for what we want to do, and then it turns out to be somewhat of a disaster once you get into it. So I would really recommend that you take another look at it, a second look, and maybe even have someone else take a look at it. And I would offer some people at IT, at our IT, if you wanted to just take a look at it. We've had a real problem with the rental assistance software. That was the perfect software for the program, and we're still struggling with it. And in fact, we may change even the software at this point. And,
Okay.
and that story is more common than you think. And I just think it's worthwhile, you know, since we're so small an organization, having someone take another look at it just to make sure it'll fit us right.
And back from my county fire days, I still have contacts at county IT, so I definitely will reach out to those folks. And yeah, I shared some of the pain of software implementation. Let's include it.
Right. Thank you, Dennis. Really excellent. And Julie, please.
Just three quick things. I just wanted to say thank you to Sashi for that great article. I've circulated it to all my fire smart neighbors and also to the Rossstown Council and the Rossstown manager. So I'm hoping they will continue to circulate that. Mark, I just wondered on the recent, what was it called? The Lassen Drive fire up in San Rafael. What mechanisms were used to evacuate people?
They used alert Marin notifications, and they used my favorite tool for evacuation, law enforcement officers going and pounding on doors and telling people to evacuate. By far the most effective way to get people out. They were using the high-low sirens so that people can differentiate emergency response sirens from evacuation sirens. And then emergency.marincounty.org had the maps of the evacuated areas. And I think that would be a place where we can improve. And I'll be working with Jason Weber and the sheriff and OES to improve the mapping part but I think that little, and the maps were there, the maps were good, they just could have been better. And so that's a tiny criticism. But this is how we get better. We look at what we've done and we find places where we can improve, and that's what we're going to do here.
Yeah. Thank you. And then you had also mentioned the KQED special on fire. I wondered if you could perhaps circulate that link so that we could take a look at that.
I will. I meant to last week and I forgot, and then I should have included it when that last email. So with the Western cities, and so I'm not barraging you with emails, but I think this is an important enough one to inundate your inbox with.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you, Julie. Sashi, please. Can't hear you, Sashi. Yeah, no sound.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, okay, we got you now.
Okay, sometimes it gets clicked over. Sorry for being a little late this morning, but wanted to just add to Julie's comment about the most recent fire that we had a fire in Southern Marin, and Chief Tubbs has requested that we do a neighborhood after action meeting to kind of pull all that stuff together. And I think that's just a really outstanding idea. I don't know that MWPA should do that, but it might be something that we might suggest to our member agencies, that it's a way to kind of tie the NRGs and the preparedness efforts to, and then there's a fire and look what we did. And here's what, how can we improve that at a neighborhood level? So I think from the MWPA purpose, it would be great to maybe that goes through ops or something like that, but that I think should be a member agency responsibility.
That's an interesting concept. The fire and law enforcement agencies have done after actions within themselves so many times. The idea of involving the public, since we are expecting so much out of the public now, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, isn't that a great idea? I thought it was brilliant from
I've never heard of that
Chief Tubbs.
before, and I really like it.
Yeah.
Typical of Chief Tubbs to come up with an idea like that. Definitely can reach out to San Rafael Fire and Marinwood Fire to make that suggestion, because I know how engaged that Marinwood community is. I have a feeling that they would jump at that opportunity. Rachel, would you want to follow up with that, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I love that idea. I'm a neighborhood over from yesterday, and it was a very tense couple hours. And I could follow what was happening in terms of all the alerts and messaging and also now the aftermath of how did you know on your phone? And so we're getting a lot more people signed up for Alert Marin and Nixle based off of yesterday. But overall, the community has been very, very appreciative to the efforts and very pro now defensible space. So that has been really a positive outcome, I guess, of the situation. I love the after action idea. I'll follow up with Chief White and Quinn with that.
And then let me know if you would like me to follow up as well.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
That'd be great.
That's fantastic. Other questions or comments? Mark, a couple of items. One is, so Mark mentioned that we did a field walk. Julie McMillan participated in our previous one. It was at the same site, but it was augmented with, I had a communication with Daniel at one TAM. As a result of our first field walk, Julie, I was commissioned to contact one TAM and ask, they're in the process of, they have a forest health monitoring program for Marin County. And they've commissioned themselves to essentially, through satellite imagery, through whatever means to, in essence, kind of track how things are going, identify, map, and track forest health. As our first field walk, I talked to Danny and just about the general condition of our landscape, which I think any of you who are driving up and down 101 or in any of our neighborhoods, look out from your windows, you can see that we are in a transitional season here where our forests are actually transitioning from where they've been for centuries into something a little bit different, more drought, more open canopies. The bays are losing their leaves. The Pacific madrones are losing their leaves. We're going to end up with a lot of top kill, and the consequences are immediate for fire implications, light and wind and fuels and what have you. But in preparation for talking to the battalion chiefs this last week, which Mark and Ann both participated in, I contacted Danny, and as a result of our first field tour, Danny is commissioned. There is satellite imagery that, in essence, monitors the vigor of forest lands, and it's how green they are. It's the same technology that farmers use. They fly the same technology over their fields to determine what areas, how well crops are growing. The good green is great. Stuff that starts to become stressed, it allows them to identify areas that are drought or disease and to take action. So Danny Franco is in the process. One TAM, they're going to be applying for an emergency NASA grant to do satellite imagery for Marin, for us to be able to monitor the health and the vigor. And in essence, these maps are really quite striking. Mark saw them and saw them at the meeting we did last week with Novato, but I'd say that 2/3 of Marin County, particularly in the northern and the eastern sides, are severely stressed, and we're experiencing and there are consequences for firemen and for homeowners and defensible space work and evacuation clearance, and it's actually just exclamation points and maybe a order of magnitude of concern over areas. We're managing into the future and not into the past as far as the risk and consequence. So the point is, and I should have just said this in 10 words, Danny, we may be asked to draft a letter of support for the grant application to support the NASA emergency grant to do the monitoring here for Marin County. So I just want to let you know, I don't think this is something that we need to go to the full board for, but if they ask, I'd just like to have consent that we would support this and see it as a worthwhile investment of our support.
And then, so that kind of leads us to our, and we can cover this when we get, never mind, we'll cover it when we get to next, the board meeting agenda.
Bruce, do you have a sense of the timing for that support letter by any chance?
Danny indicated it was weeks out.
I think formally, since this is asking for executive committee action of support for something, we would need to actually have it as an agenda item. And if it doesn't work well to do it through the executive committee due to timing, we could just have it on consent for the board meeting potentially, just to make sure that we can we can have that and have the public aware that that's an action that we'll be taking. I don't see that it would
Okay,
be
well-
controversial at all, but just to adhere to actions taken under the Brown Act.
Okay, I think we may want to revisit our policies regarding supporting in entities and initiatives, but what we can do to facilitate quick action, I think is going to be critical.
Okay, I can help. I can talk to you about it, Mark, also between now and then.
Okay. Julie,
Just a quick question. I'm just wondering, Mark or Bruce, if you could elaborate on how such a study would inform our efforts, MWPA's efforts.
I have some ideas. Mark, why don't you jump first? And
Well, when it comes to MWPA efforts, it will help us inform whether the recommended defensible space work around homes is sufficient. The recommended distance away from roads that we're doing veg management work for evacuation route clearing will be sufficient, or our shaded fuel breaks between the WUI boundary at the WUI boundary. That this type of work would really help us inform to what depth that we need to go with our work. Operationally, it's very informative for the ground troops to know that what to expect fire behaviorally, and actually to continue to promote an aggressive initial attack, because we really do not want these fires to develop any type of energy at all. And that connection between the veg management work and our operational folks, so that they have the knowledge of where that veg management work is vital, because it gives them an idea strategically and tactically where they can have success.
yeah, that's excellent answer, Mark. I won't augment that at all.
I'd love to add one point to that. I could see it being really useful in terms of designing forest management for maybe the next work plan, in terms of reducing that drought stress on some of the mature trees that we have in our forests.
Maybe we could put like 2 or 3 or 4 bullet points in our letter of support showing how those efforts will enhance our mission, so that the public can see that.
Excellent idea, Julie. It is all about the end game. And so Mark and Ann's points both, I think, encapsulate the benefits. I think Mark mentioned the evacuation study that's coming. Last week, the Calder Fire IC said that the fire was burning twice as intensely and fast, spreading twice as fast as current fire models are capable of predicting. So in essence, these are data points that we can integrate into our prescriptions, our treatments, how intense, ground fuel, ground ladder, ground thinning, evacuation route clearance, and then the models that are going to be done here, the simulations that are going to be done by the contractor for the evacuation route work. We're going to hand them that data and have them find ways to moderate and modify the algorithms that they use to come up with solutions with risk assessment, and putting purple, red, orange, yellow, green on the map. This is real data, real-time data, and it's relevant to the work that we're currently doing. So yes, we can put something together. And one last item, Mark, did you mention and I'm sorry, the sound here is not really good off my little PC I'm working on. The Stanford MWPA story project, the status of that project?
Thanks for the reminder. When I was going through my notes, I forgot to add that this morning. So we provided a list of recommended interviewees to Stanford, and they've started that process. I was interviewed last week. I believe Bruce was interviewed last week. And Miri is the lady who was facilitating it. I thought she did an excellent job. She had great questions that just kind of led me down the path of helping to share that story. And then after they capture data from the people they've did in the first round of the interviews, then they'll start digging deeper into that list of interviewees that we suggested to them.
Great. Thanks. Okay, any other questions or comments for Mark? Let's move to the public, please, for any comments. Allison?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Thanks all. Thanks, board. Let's move on to the consent calendar. Or, well, any more discussion? And I'm seeing none. Okay, thanks, Mark. Really excellent report. So, and Ann, both. You guys are just doing a fantastic job. So many things and moving forward here. Okay, consent calendar. Opportunity for the public to comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar in one action, or an alternative, items on the consent calendar can be removed by any committee or staff member for separate discussion and a vote. So now take public comment on the consent calendar, please.
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members. Excuse me. And there is no public comment.
So do any committee members wish to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Rachel, second. Julie, moving to approve, and Rachel, second. Allison?
Nevada Fire District,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley.
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
City of San Rafael.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to informational items. And Mark, this is the request for qualifications and proposals for the wildfire evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. Mark Brown.
I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty excited about this. This has been a long time in coming. This process for the language of the RFP actually started prior to the official formation of the MWPA. And it was a grant that was being authored out of Marin County Department of Public Works in partnership with Marin County Fire. And back in my old role, I got to participate in the writing of that grant. It was for a Caltrans grant to really study the infrastructure of our evacuation routes. Unfortunately, the county didn't get the grant on that. We missed by a couple little points here and there, but that created the foundation of what turned into what you guys are reading now. And we turned it from not just looking at the infrastructure, but also looking at how it interacts with fire. And it's really, I'll give credit where credit's due. It's really Jason Weber's vision that behind this. And Charlotte Jourdain, again, exceeding expectations, took that and has worked with members of the advisory technical committee and members of the ops committee. And I think the product is amazing. And it's one of those things where the more effort that you put into it, the better at the front side, the better it will be on the back side. And I think you all know that we delayed the rollout of the RFP because of the implementation of Zonehaven. The original intent was going to include a product like Zonehaven, but Zonehaven eliminated that need. But then there was also information that we learned from the implementations of Zonehaven that we're able to apply into the RFP. It really is a first of its kind risk assessment tool. And remember, it's not just fire risk. We're looking at road conditions, capacity, intersection functionality, observed traffic behavior, constraints and impediments, access for the fire response, vulnerable populations, vegetation impact of roadways, so on and so forth. And just to give you an example of some of the things that we're looking at is traffic preemption devices. And that is making lights turn green when we want them to turn green in the direction that we want them to turn green. Every traffic light has a spot to allow for traffic preemption. We want to get an inventory of what traffic lights actually have traffic preemption, what model of traffic preemption they're using, and then create some type of central command that, I'll use Sir Francis Drake as an example, that all lights are going east during an evacuation or turn green. And so that's it, that shows just going above and beyond what looking at the fire risk. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about it. The project will most likely be a partnership between different vendors because it's so broad in its and comprehensive that we don't think there's a one-stop vendor for this. So we really think it's going to be a broad partnership. And then, I had some great conversations with Julie this weekend or a couple days ago about this. And a question she posed was, are we looking at just event in Marin, or are we looking at how this interacts with a regional fire event, fires in Sonoma County at the same time that we have fires in Marin County? And no, we're not looking at that in the modeling. However, I think the work that we are doing sets us up for success in that regional event. And it will give the incident commanders and our Office of Emergency Services more informed information for their game day decisions. So I even though we aren't taking into account that maybe we can't send people to Sonoma County because they're evacuating at the same time, the work that we're doing here will still inform us and make it more efficient and safer for our residents to get out going that way. Quick discussion of the review committee that we've assembled and the why behind it. We wanted to diversify the expertise in that committee. And so Jason Weber and I were able to put our heads together, and it really was Jason and I that created that with a little bit of help from Ann and Charlotte. But Ann Richmond from Transportation Authority of Marin, that seemed like a very obvious choice for us. Jason Weber obviously needed to be on it. Jack Leapster from the Marin County Community Development Agency. We've asked the CDA to be involved because by legal statute now, general plans have to include evacuation planning. And so they have a stake in this game, and we wanted them to have an opportunity to weigh in on this. Kevin McGowan from South Toledo Department of Public Works. He's someone I've worked with for many years and someone who I value his opinion. Obviously, Chief White has a great perspective. And what I like about Chief White is that he hasn't always been in Marin. I think there's an advantage to having someone that's not always been in Marin Fire Service, has a little bit of a different perspective to give that different spin on it. And then Todd Lando, just because Todd's very talented and thinks like this. We considered asking Caltrans, obviously because they are a major player, but we've struggled a little bit getting a consistent Caltrans rep. And in law enforcement, I mean, evacuation is their main, that's their responsibility. However, we're not really looking necessarily too deep at that aspect of the mechanics. So that's why we didn't ask a law enforcement person to be involved. One note that I do want to point out, and I thought we had captured this, but apparently some of it still slipped through. The term private roads is still in the risk assessment, the RFP, and really needs to, and that'll be changed to non-county maintained or non-city maintained roads, because there is a difference between private roads and non-county and non-city maintained roads. And the intent is the non-county and non-city maintained roads. Excellent question that Julie posed, and I hadn't even thought about it. And that is asking Tiburon and Belvedere if they want to partner in this, and perhaps we share costs. And we already have precedents for that with Zone Haven. They are partnering with us in Zone Haven. We created a cost share formula with that. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I can approach Chief Pierce from Tiburon Fire, and we already have a cost share formula. So I thought it was great. And then there was a couple typos that Julie caught. Page 3, known versus no. And then on page 6, I think she had a great point where it says that we will coordinate, we're asking the vendor to coordinate the risk factors with the MWPA, and perhaps MWPA was a little bit too narrow of a target audience. And for me, my definition of MWPA is much more than the literal staff of MWPA. And to me, it includes our member agencies and all of our committees, but that's not clear to every reader. So we'll expand upon MWPA, meaning all of our member agencies and our committees. And by member agencies, I don't just mean the fire aspect of it. And I'll use San Anselmo as an example. Their director of public works is their representative on our advisory technical committee. So to me, when I say member entities, member agencies, I mean not just the fire department, but I mean all aspects of that member entity. So we'll be able to tap into tremendous subject matter expertise through that, including law enforcement. I'll be a project manager that's listed, that's mentioned in there, and to help allow Ann to focus on the work plan. But then the projects that come out of the recommendations from that, guess whose shop that will fall into? That will fall into Ann's shop. And then the last piece I'll add is what hasn't been included yet. We are currently working on it. And due to the depth of this, it was recommended that we include a software as a service agreement as part of the RFP up front. And so we are using the Zone Haven and the Fireside SaaS agreement that we have as our template, but we're strengthening it in order to be more applicable to this RFP. And Megan, if you have anything else to add on the software as a service agreement, please let me know. Okay. And with that, I'm open to any questions from you guys.
Excellent. Rachel and Dennis, please.
Thank you for the information on it. Is there another local agency or area that's actually using this type of tool?
From what we know, this is a first of its kind. Ann was helping develop a similar tool, but it wasn't in Sonoma County, and it wasn't focused on evacuation routes. And then there's an application called Land Tender from a company called Vibrant Planet that's similar, but it's not looking, it's only looking at fire risk for large landscape level projects. It's not looking at evacuation. So we feel that this is really a first of its kind study.
So we become the guinea pig around who's developing this. Okay.
And that's why we need a strong software as a service agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, great. In terms of the, I guess the use of it, I mean, the real customer per se will be the agencies. Is that correct? The various, right? It's not the community as the customer.
Right.
Okay. Okay. We might want to just call that out a little bit more in the documentation so that it's really understood that this is for the actual, even though you read it with your lens on it, if somebody else from the outside may not necessarily see that it's, it's yet another tool for us. And it's not really for the general public as much as it is for the agencies, which I think makes a lot of sense. All right. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent comments, Rachel. Thank you. Dennis, please.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for the report. I just read it this morning, so I didn't get back to you earlier. In your committee and the makeup of that committee, should you need another person, I would recommend Nancy Whelan from Ren Transit, who has a responsibility to transport people during an event, as another set of eyes if you're looking for someone. I don't think you need to add her if you don't want to keep it at that number, but maybe if someone's unable to do it, she could fill in. The other question I had for you, and I think it's great, you're including Belvedere and Tiburon, but I want to make sure that the share agreement covers all the costs of MWPA, not just this project. It should be administrative, should be election costs, some portions that are attributed to this offer, because we need to make sure that our voters and our constituents that supported this are left neutral when it comes to this share agreement. And I think that, you know, that should be understood by Belvedere and Tiburon, that they can't just have a free ride by jumping onto a project and just paying that project cost. There's other costs associated with the MWPA formation and continuation. So hopefully that's taken into account.
Absolutely, point well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Other directors, questions or comments? Fantastic work, Mark. I find myself wondering when we have this in product, what then? And Rachel's question about, I think, who is the customer? I think we're going to find that there is a very broad audience that's going to be interested in this, that municipalities will be interested, transportation agencies. I think that we internally will be looking at where we're investing in vegetation management, what kind of vegetation management, where municipalities are looking at the kind of work they're doing. I'm really excited about this. I just want to say, but I think we're going to find that it's going to end up being a lot more than we envisioned, and it's going to tell us, it's going to provide us with more data than we could even have imagined. So I kind of find myself wondering what's the game, what's the end game with this? What are we going to do with this end product? How are we going to use it? And these are related to questions that Julie asked about the satellite imagery for monitoring vigor. What's the end game? What's the application? I think it'd be worthwhile to think through and do maybe a whiteboard exercise as to where this data is going to become relevant and what effect it might have on the work that we do.
And when I like the whiteboard idea, would you think, and I see two realms, and I think a whiteboard type discussion with the ops committee to help frame, and the advisory technical committee to help frame the type of work that's being done, and then perhaps with the executive committee for the unintended consequences of the results, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
at the strategic implications.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a bit of a pondering here, but anyway, yeah. Thanks, Rachel, please.
Bruce, I think you made some really good points, and I'd like to add on to that a little bit. The RFP is very comprehensive, and you already mentioned that you expect there'll be needing to have multiple providers for it. It may be to break it down into different RFPs, because one provider is going to say they can do it all. And we know that that's, it's going back to that earlier conversation about software, and that I think that maybe looking at how to break this down into, with the expectation that it's going to be different vendors, unless you already have some already in mind who can serve more of this. But I think we'll get people who, some part of it's going to be their bread and butter, and part of it's just not going to be their bread and butter.
You'd be surprised the excitement outside of the MWPA and the conversations that have already occurred within different vendors that are saying, okay, we want to partner with you. And so these little coalitions have already started occurring. So I do think, as written, that we'll get the product we need. And then I think we have to have the discipline, though. If we don't receive the proposal that we think we need to receive, then we retune it up.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, Mark, I agree. I've had some inquiries from a couple of entities, and there are indeed those coalitions. There are people that do the fire, the Monte Carlo simulation. This is their bread and butter. It's an established art, and it's in transition right now. But kind of to your question, Rachel, about is it a lot of what's being planned here is not new by any means. This is bread and butter for the United States Forest Service, for forest planning, for CAL FIRE. It's bread and butter for incident command teams when there's an ignition, looking at weather and projecting evacuation timing, and who do we notify when. This is state of the art. It's emerging. Ours is going to be the newest because it'll be the most recent one. And I do think that the satellite imagery is going to be an addition that's not included in current modeling. But yeah, the coalitions are there. They're excited. This is going to be some of the most intelligent and competent and capable analysts are really excited to be a part of this. So, Mark, great. Julie, please.
Yeah, I know this is going to cost a lot of money. I'm just wondering if this are these costs going to be incurred this fiscal year, or is this going to roll over several? I just wondered about that.
So a great question. We encumbered money for this study in last fiscal year, and we will be rolling that over through into this fiscal year in order to fund it. And if the research rolls into the next fiscal year, we'll continue to roll it over. If we have any need to have a budget adjustment, then we'll work back through the board for that. I feel comfortable with the allocation that we have in place now, though.
And for the record, it's about $850,000 are sitting allocated to this project. It's a substantial amount of money, substantial amount of analytical work. So really great question, Julie.
And I have one other question, sorry.
Julie.
You mentioned, Mark, that you're the project manager for the RFP work, and then the actual work will be under Anne's watch. I'm just worried that Anne is going to become overextended, and I assume you're going to be evaluating that as the work presents itself and other work that Anne has presents itself. But I just wanted to express that.
Absolutely, and that's going to be part of this, the strategic ad hoc subcommittee. I think is going to help and make sure that we have the staffing. And we do have a limiting factor to a degree, and that is it's this RFP will inform the work plan, and the work plan has a finite budget to work with. So except for cost of living adjustments that we'll have through the years, that the budget threshold is actually going to be that the limiter to how much work that the work plan can include, which is the cap for the amount of work that Anne will have. So, but we still do, we are running into capacity issues now. And so we have to solve that.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks, Mark. Sashi, please.
I think that was a very good consideration, and I'm wondering, Mark, if you can address how the ops committee is going to fit into this, because I think that there are going to be a bunch of things that'll come out of this that are going to end up being, public works kinds of things, or things that will go to other, that'll be executed not by fire agencies, for example. So, is there a way that the ops committee can be a part of alleviating some of that, or giving us some capacity?
Well, absolutely. The Ops Committee is and the Advisory Technical Committee will be using the product of this RFP to inform the project that they propose for the work plan when it comes to stuff that falls in within Measure C. And then we want to share the information with our the public works entities and so forth, so that as they look for projects within, I'll use parking boxes as an example. Perhaps the study identifies parking issues on evacuation route XYZ, and perhaps parking boxes will alleviate that, and then we share that information with Public Works, and then that becomes their project rather than ours.
Well, and just adding on to that, there might be some room for future, committees or collaborations around putting together funding sources for these types of things. Because I think this information could then lead to more funding sources being available for some of those public works projects if they include some of these elements.
And such as that original Caltrans grant that we applied for, I think this is an awesome tool to augment that application.
Great. Thank you, Sashi. Thank you, Mark. Other questions or comments? Fantastic project. Very exciting. I'm excited too. Let's go to the public now. Allison.
First comment will come from Larry Minikes.
Welcome, Larry.
Yeah, thank you and good morning. And to Dennis's comment, with Tiburon and Belvedere, please, no free rides. We went there, we were there at 11 at night trying to convince them to join it, and they said it was too expensive. So there you go. And to Julie's comment about overextending Anne, I brought this up privately too, and I'm wondering whether it's time to discuss bringing in a third person, an assistant, and whether this is something that should be discussed among yourselves. And my third comment is to evacuation routes. And some of you or all of you may have seen on Monday what happened at Lake Tahoe with the 6-hour traffic jam. And so I went to check on Zone Haven, and it turns out that Yuba and Nevada counties do have Zone Haven, and so does Plumas and Lassen. But interestingly enough, Nevada, Placer and El Dorado, no. So in a way, Tahoe Monday is a poster child for why Zone Haven can be extremely helpful. And with that, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks very much.
Looking for any additional raised hands for public comment. And there's no further public comment.
Okay, thanks all participants and board. So back to the committee here for any further discussion. Mark, seeing none, no, I think you have this well in hand. It's really exciting what we're doing, and we're looking forward to the product. I am looking forward, Mark, to gaming this out once the product comes in, where this information will be relevant, who it would inform. Anyway, that's the whiteboard exercise, if you will. And you all don't need a lot more work to do, but I do think that, you know, it's coming our way. We might as well do our best to anticipate the next steps. And I guess one just last is on the capacity issue, which keeps coming up and coming up. The answer is yes, that's what this strategic ad hoc group is to take a look at with Mark and Ann, is to look at the body of work that we have ahead of us. And I had drafted out 16 things that we're moving forward, is to put them into and I've talked with several board members who have some ideas as far as how we might approach it, but the bottom line is to identify what we're doing, when it's going to get done, who's going to do it, what kind of staff capacity and duration and staff needs are, and come up with an answer as to, we need, you know, X FTEs to support the work. The other question is not just bringing, is at what appropriate rate, and we're paying contractors $195, $150, all the way down to $30, I think. So we also want to target this at the appropriate level so that we're being fiscally responsible. So let's move on. Any other comments, please? Wonderful. We're moving on to the agenda review, September 16th, 2021 Board Directors Meeting Agenda. Mark, again.
I think our conversation today is really will make the agenda conversation pretty simple. It's not a super full agenda. And the only thing I ask of you is our last exec committee, we talked about a presentation from Danny Franco to talk about the research he's doing, the forest health research, the difference between the imagery he's getting and the LiDAR imagery. But so I definitely like that idea, and it's something I really think we do need to have. The only pause I have is the presentation that Bruce put together with Ray Moritz, presented to Nevada Fire, would also be an excellent presentation for the board. So I think both are, to me, a no-brainer. The question is sequence. Do we hit the Danny Franco one first, or do we go to the Bruce and Ray Moritz one first? Not to put you on the spot, Bruce, but I thought it was a great presentation.
Danny's work is, I think we might want to do the Ray Moritz Bruce Goins show first. Because, you know, Danny's work is in general, it is a forest health monitoring project in general. And in fact, you know, having Danny present to be supportive, I think would be good. I'd be happy to talk to you in some detail as far as what would be valuable, but we're talking about maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I think because of the relevance of the drought crisis that we're in, and the timeliness of integration of these implications into our work is probably more timely now, more time sensitive.
And if the rest of the exec committee agrees on that route, then Bruce, you and I can work behind the scenes to pare it down to 10 minutes.
Great.
Sounds good.
Okay, wonderful.
And Bruce, I'm sorry I threw you under the bus during the meeting, but that thought occurred to me while we were talking today during the executive officer comments. And so I'm sorry to surprise you like that in the meeting.
Okay. So let's see, where are we? Any questions from, so the agenda speaks for itself. Mark, you're suggesting an educational item. Any committee members? Julie, yes, please.
I was just going to suggest, Mark, that in your executive officer remarks for the entire board, you may want to contrast the evacuation that's occurred in South Lake Tahoe versus the evacuation that occurred on the Lassen Road most recent fire, because I think a lot of us have seared in our minds that line of cars trying to get out of South Lake Tahoe, and it's very disturbing. And so the point that they did not have Zone Haven, I think, is a really good point to emphasize. The other comment I had, and Megan, I don't know if this is cool or not, but number 10, the action item for contract amendments. I wondered if we could simply put that on the consent calendar rather than having a discussion about it.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, that was the original hope, but there's a government code section that was adopted in the last few years that requires any executive comp to be an action item rather than on consent. So I think it hopefully will go quickly, and we'll have a staff report that's straightforward. So hopefully that will help, keep the discussion sort of on target.
That government code.
I know, it's
Thank
always
you,
something.
Megan.
You can blame the city of Bell for that.
Oh God, no, let's not go there.
But, and to your point, Julie, though, technically the only item is my contract that needs to be part of the discussion, and Ann's technically could be part of consent, but we figured we might as well just keep them together.
Okay, wonderful. Sashi, please.
For future educational items, Mill Valley and Southern Marin Fire are going to be doing an evacuation drill practice of traffic flow at the end of the month, so that we can practice, switching roads to contraflow and, banking cars in particular areas. And we're going to test that out. And that's something I've actually been wanting to do for a long time. I'm really happy we're finally testing that out. And I wonder if something like that, or even the neighborhood after action report, could be something that we could have Southern Marin Fire report out on as one of those educational sessions.
I looked at the goals of your upcoming evacuation, and it is one of the most ambitious evacuation.
It is, yeah. We'll see how it goes. I think we might have to do it more than once, but yeah. But I think everybody will be interested. Exactly what Julie said. People will be interested in a test of that.
And I think we also, and I can address this with Julie's suggestion during my executive officer report, I do think we have to be open and honest with the public that there will be traffic jams during evacuations. There's no way of getting around that. And it's our goal to make sure that even if there is or not even if, it's when there is a traffic jam, they will survive in their cars on that road. So, yeah. But the Zone Haven, with my nephew living, the first thing I looked at was Zone Haven. I went, oh, there's no Zone Haven there. So I had to go to the Nevada County Sheriff's website to get that information. So point well taken.
Great. So any other questions, comments? Okay, let's go to the public, please, for comment.
If I may,
Megan?
just to make one suggestion based on the initial, the letter of support issue that came up earlier in the meeting, we may want to just, since the meeting looks like it won't be too heavy in terms of content, maybe we can have that as a discussion item, whether to change the policy a bit for that legislative support policy, just given that we may have had enough instances where that slowed us down from being able to put support letters in on time, and empower staff a bit more to do those letters where it's fairly straightforward. I think right now everything runs through the executive committee, so it would be, and that's once a month, and that can sound, we may want to look at that.
Thank you, Megan. I would certainly support it. I see some heads nodding also. So Mark, we can integrate that into.
Yes, absolutely. We can make that an action item. I think that would fall under the action item of the agenda.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Mark. Okay, ready to move the public, please?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Back to the committee for any discussion. Looks like we're good. Let's move on to item 9. Any requests for agenda items from the committee members, for future agenda items? We've had some discussion already as to this. Looks like there are no new suggestions. Okay, so let's, it's 11/11, September 2nd. Thank you, board. Thanks for all your great questions and comments. And Mark and Ann, thank you for the fantastic work you guys are doing. Just fantastic. And we're going to get you some help. We're going to get you the right kind of help at the right price. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
I know.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.